Hi everyone, my name is Amber Patrick and I am your moderator today. The resolution before us during this debate is whether or not free and appropriate public education, FAPE, should include mandatory ABA services for children and youth with ASD in schools. So I just want to go over the topic of what FAPE means. So for the first one, free means that all eligible students with disabilities will be educated at public expense. So there's no cost to families except for maybe any membership fees that they join for clubs, but it's mostly free for general education students. The second part is appropriate, and appropriate means that your child with a disability is entitled to an education that is appropriate for him or her. It will be tailored to and planned to meet the needs of the IEP, which is the Individualized Education Plan. And next is public. Public refers to the public school system. Children with disabilities, whatever the nature or severity of their disability might be, they have the right to be educated under public supervision. So typically children are educated under the public school system, but sometimes they are educated in a private school setting. It just depends. And the last part is education. So education must be provided to every eligible school-aged child with a disability. So if this describes your child, FAPE ensures that he or she will receive a public education that includes the services outlined in her Individualized Education Program, the IEP. So the education should prepare your child for the future, for further education, for further employment, and independent living. So now I'm going to introduce Sean. Sean's going to be your stater, and he's going to begin by introducing the members of the proposition and opposition sides, as well as a parent that will be joining us today.
Thank you, Amber. So representing the proposition is the first speaker, Luel Nadala, and the second speaker, Leah Robinson. Representing the opposition is Sarah Favilla, and lastly, a parent will be joining us by the name of Ricky Garza. The proposition will argue that the applied behaviour analysis in a classroom should be required under FAPE. We will discuss the efficiency of ABA treatment in increasing academic skills of children with autism and in reducing barriers to learning such as off-task or aggressive behaviour. We will also address the issue of funding and the high cost of ABA services to parents, including the limitations associated with insurance coverages. Finally, we will discuss the need for intensive therapy and the difficulties associated with that, such as finding time after school for private ABA therapy. The proposition will conclude that ABA in the classroom is the best and most effective option for the children in need of these services. The opposition will discuss the importance of behavioural intervention versus academic services. Argument suggests more cohesive funding plans which maintain the separation of ABA services and academic services and ethical questions that are raised when considering the implementation of ABA into the public school system. Lastly, the opposition will discuss how public schools receive funding. Ricky Garza, the parent, will discuss how implementing ABA into classroom affects his family.
Great, thank you, Sean. So at this time, we're now going to get started. So I'd like to start with Luel. She's going to start speaking her point on the opposition side.
Thank you, Amber. First, I'd like to start out by discussing the effectiveness of ABA treatment. Much research has been conducted that ABA as a treatment are scientifically proven more effective than other interventions or other treatments, especially for children with ASD. The results of these experiments that were conducted prove that children who receive high-quality, intensive, evidence-based interventions as early as possible are more likely to be placed in regular education and mainstream classrooms. Having mandatory ABA services in schools for children diagnosed with ASD would mean that they will be able to start as early as possible in school in order to attain the best outcomes that have been scientifically proven effective. These outcomes include learning independence, not just in regular education, but outside in the community, acquisition in language, cognitive abilities, social skills, behavioral improvements such as reduced anxiety and aggression will all be facilitated. ABA, unlike other treatments allow these children to practice different skills in structured or unstructured situations. ABA has known to be the safest and most widely used treatment for ASD compared to other approaches such as dietary and medication treatments, which are done to relieve symptoms of ASD but are not intended to practice these children's functional skills. At this time, I'd like to share a video with all of you regarding a county school district and ABA services.
Douglas County schools shot down by the U.S. Supreme Court, and today's unanimous ruling will make schools do more for students with special needs. Denver 7's Jennifer Kovalevsky breaks down why.
Looks like we're having some technical difficulties. Let me try that again.
Douglas County schools shot down by the U.S. Supreme Court, and today's unanimous ruling will make schools do more for students with special needs. Denver 7's Jennifer Kovalevsky breaks down why this matters.
Shannon, this is a big deal. It holds districts accountable and raises the bar for students with disabilities.
Okay, put your glasses on. There you go.
Homework is a nightly activity at the Bruno household.
What do you learn in school today?
15-year-old Kevin Bruno has Down syndrome.
Good job, buddy.
Now a freshman at Pomona High School.
You want to show them all your medals?
His dad is familiar with the individualized education programs, or IEPs, for kids with special needs.
It's always a give and take, and looking at Kevin's individual needs.
Birthday card.
Kids like Kevin are the ones who will benefit from this latest Supreme Court ruling.
I think that ruling will make things better.
All 8 justices unanimously sided with a Douglas County student whose parents say the public education system failed him. Their son Drew has autism, and they say he wasn't making progress until his parents enrolled him in a private specialized school.
They're raising the stakes, so districts are going to be held more accountable.
The ruling from the nation's highest court requires school districts to challenge students with disabilities. It also gives parents greater power to advocate for their child. There are still questions about where the funding will come from.
Special education is not cheap. It's very costly, and a lot of school districts and educators we do rely on federal funds.
Okay.
For the Bruno family, they've seen firsthand the power of inclusion.
Here's my best friend Karen.
And what challenging students with special needs can do.
He participates with the regular teams in sports, and Kevin's just part of the school.
I'll be a firefighter.
In a statement, Douglas County says that
Thank you for that video, Luell. So we're now going to hear from Sean. You may begin speaking.
Hi, Luell. Thank you for your information. My question is for you. Do you think that there's enough time to implement the ABA programs into classrooms for them to be effective for an individual?
Great question, Sean, and the answer is yes. ABA can be built into the curriculum so that children are learning and completing academic tasks that are presented in a way that works best for them. These children spend most of their time in school, so there is plenty of time to incorporate ABA programs into their curriculums. A lot of students are receiving ABA in schools today, ensuring that they comply with the teacher and follow through with the activities in class, and have shown improvements in their participation in class. The results will just be as effective if ABA becomes mandatory in class, especially with the amount of time students spend in classrooms in a day.
Great. Thank you, Luell, for your response, and Sean for your question. So we're now going to hear from Sarah on the opposition side.
Thank you, Amber. So the major point that I would like to stress for this topic is that ABA services should remain separate from the FAPE academic services that are already in place. ABA is focusing on transferring skills that benefit the client behaviorally, rather than focusing strictly on academic growth and success. The current FAPE academic placement includes regular mainstreamed classroom settings with or without related aids, special education classrooms in regular or separate classrooms. They can be all day or need-based, and FAPE currently offers psychological counseling in school. So the focus point for this would be that FAPE fails to identify who the related services are referring to and what role they play in the services. ABA as a component of FAPE, a focus on a larger scale of needs must be considered. For example, FAPE would expand to address the level of success each student needs for post-secondary success, such as basic life skills, social and emotional growth, and generality across environments. While FAPE requires periodic evaluations of the student while mapping their own progress based off of the IEP goals, they do not currently incorporate behavioral goals unless directly related to the academic interference and/or progress of the IEP goals. So the point I would like to consider to conclude this argument is what is the point of our education system? To further our students academically while ultimately generating a successful future foundation. Concluding the argument, ABA and FAPE are two complementary concepts that interact with one another but stand on separate foundations. ABA focuses on behavior while FAPE focuses on the academic growth of the student.
Great, thank you for that point, Sarah. So we're now going to hear again from Luell on the proposition side.
Thank you, Amber. And I'd just like to discuss about how much more it is for these students to receive more ABA. Following up Lova's study in 1987, 30 children who were receiving ABA treatments were assessed a few years later. The results showed in 1993 that those 19 children who received intensive 40 hours or more behavioral intervention retained their intellectual functioning more than the other 19 who received only 10 or less behavioral intervention. Those who had intensive intervention scored 30 points higher in their IQ, and I quote from the study that they showed higher levels of functioning, held their own regular classes, and did not show any signs of emotional disturbances and exhibited adequate development of adaptive and social skills within the normal age. The study is very significant because not only did it show favorable results from receiving more hours of ABA services, it has shown maintenance across these students in comparison to the other 19 who received less than 10 hours. They showed better outcomes in different areas, especially social skills, which most kids under the spectrum lack. Another similar study by Cohen and Smith, which replicated Lova's studies, showed that the children received 35 to 40 hours of ABA were joined in a regular education without assistance after 3 years of ongoing intensive ABA. This shows how beneficial ABA is, including mandatory ABA services in FAPE will result similarly to these studies. Hours these children receive for ABA, the more benefits they get out of it, since these students spend most of their time being in school learning.
I would also like to add a point here, if I may. While ABA is certainly focused on the science of behavior, the definition of behavior is broad enough to include many relevant academic tasks. ABA can be used to successfully teach critical academic skills such as reading, writing, math, and most importantly, communication.
Okay, great. Thank you, Luell and Leah. So I'm now going to introduce Ricky, the parent, to start speaking.
Hi, thank you, Amber. This is very important for me as a subject, as a decision affect my son and I directly. My son has autism spectrum disorder and currently attending public school, which is he's in part of the special education program. He's in 5th grade. He's a very smart, young, intelligent young man, and he's very attentive to everything. He just has some behavior problems. But currently, my son is not getting any ABA services. As far as the teacher, they do everything they can. They teach him techniques, they teach him methods, check for understanding, and I applaud them, and that's awesome for them to help them out. However, if ABA services do become available, I wonder if the teachers are going to be qualified to teach my child. I understand they qualify for special ed in general, but are they qualified to teach behavior analysis? For instance, sometimes I ask the parents, sometimes I ask the teachers about any services or any recommendation that they think they could give me about ABA. And a lot of the times they don't know what ABA stands for, what are the significance about it. So I suggest, to have a teacher being trained with this matter, and that will help them out a lot. And that way, there's to be it's a method that needs to be taken upon.
Thank you, Ricky. So we will now take a question at this time.
Hi, Ricky. Thank you for your information. I appreciate your input. However, my question is actually for Leah. Leah, do you think teachers can be trained adequately to provide proper ABA services in the classroom?
Thanks for your question. ABA can absolutely be incorporated into the classroom. In fact, some school districts have already successfully trained teachers to implement evidence-based teaching using the principles of applied behavior analysis. The Pennsylvania Training and Technical Assistance Network, or PATN, an initiative of the Pennsylvania Board of Education, provides training and continued supports from ABA practitioners and consultants to teachers in Pennsylvania school districts. Teachers in the Harrisburg district, for example, received 3 days of intensive hands-on training in the principles and implementation of ABA therapy. After the initial training, 97% of those teachers demonstrated competency in the material. Teachers also received continued support and training in the classroom throughout the year. ABA has been in classrooms in the Harrisburg School District since 2003 and has had a high success rate for over a decade. For example, students evaluated using the VB MAP assessments, an assessment tool that evaluates verbal behavior, including ability to ask for and label items and engage in conversations, gained an average of 15 milestones in just one semester. These programs can be and are already successfully implemented in the classroom.
Great points, Leah. Looks like I'm having technical difficulties, so hopefully you can all still hear me. So I'm now going to call upon Sarah, the opposition speaker.
Thank you, Amber. The second point that I would like to make is regarding ethics. Combining FAPE and ABA raises many ethical concerns. Some of the key points that I'd like to talk about today are that applied behavior analysis answers to the American Psychiatric Association Code of Ethics, while teachers' ethical guidelines do not. When implementing ABA services within the classroom, would these teachers be administering the interventions based off of the principles suggested by the APA, or were they referring to the regulations required by their school districts? Another question that was raised would be, how can the ABA be effectively incorporated into the IEPs while maintaining the overall goal of generating academic success while still focusing on the quality of life for the client? Is this effective and appropriate to train the teachers while adding to the load of the educational guidelines and requirements offered by the school district? Is there sufficient funding for the schools in order to benefit the client appropriately? IEPs are legally binding, and they become the school's responsibility to maintain the implementation, periodic updates, and data collection to represent the success and failures to meet the education goals. Who then would be responsible for implementing the ABA services within the classroom, as well as maintaining the data collection for the ABA interventions throughout the class day? Does the implementation of the ABA interventions take away from the IEP with the combined services? To conclude this argument, combining ABA services and FAPE programs may present ethical concerns and run the risk of compromising the ethical principles implemented by the APA.
Okay, thank you, Sarah. Looks like Sean has a question.
Hi, Sarah. I feel like you make a valid point here. I have a question of my own. Regarding ethics, do you think that teachers are able to get enough training to implement the ABA for it to be effective?
Currently, because there is no common ground between FAPE and ABA, I do not feel that it would be ethical to combine the training for the teachers on top of their training for their regular school day throughout their school years. In order for FAPE and ABA to be combined, there must be some sort of middle ground and agreement made between academics and behavior before implementing some sort of training for the clients.
Great, thank you, Sarah and Sean, for your questions. So I'm now going to call upon the parent, Ricky. You may start speaking.
Hi, Amber. Thank you. In my case, whenever I make a visit to my school, my child's school, I walk in the classroom and I notice many students are in the classroom of 25 to 30 students per teacher. How is that possible? It seems that a teacher are understaffed and they're understaffed. And how are they going to be able to get enough teachers to implement ABA services as combined? One way, as a way to fix is to hire behavior therapists to join in the classroom and working with the teacher and the special education teacher. If they could do that, they could work together, combine the general teacher and the special ed teacher and the behavior analysis. And I think that you could implement that and help each other out for the success of the students. So in that case, that will be one of the major things that I think is possible. Another thing is how we going to specialize and how we are going to fund the behavior analysis, implementing that with education.
Okay, thank you, Ricky. I think you make a great point here, speaking about whether, is there enough funding for it. So we're now going to hear from the opposition side, actually the proposition side, Luell.
Thank you, Amber. My last point emphasizes the funding of ABA services in classrooms. There are different ways that ABA in schools can be funded, so funding is available. Children between ages 3 and 21 have the privilege to receive FAPE, who is funded by a local education agency under the state and federal law. ABA services are actually included in FAPE as long as it is part of the child's IEP. And if the child does not have an IEP or does not have ABA services written on their IEP, then the child has to be referred to special education evaluation in the school district. Making ABA services mandatory in school will be covered by FAPE, and parents do not have to pay in time as their children receive ABA services. If in case the child's ABA services are not covered through the IEP, medical insurances are also available. There are a lot of insurances that cover ABA services, either fully or copays and or deductibles, but these help a lot and nothing compared to the benefits that the child will be receiving from the ABA services. These insurances will provide the same services to people with autism in the same manner as other medical diagnoses. Regional Center is also a good source for funding for ABA services as long as the student is diagnosed with ASD before the age of 18. This funding is for people whose insurances were denied to support the ABA services. There are also grants available as well to cover the medical needs, including ASD. One of them being the United Healthcare Children's Foundation, and these grants cover for what the commercial health benefit plan cannot cover with medical services. With all of these fundings and grants, it is not impossible for students to receive ABA services in classrooms, not only at home, not only in school, but they are available in school. These ensure that if ABA services are mandatory in schools, then it will be covered by different possible funds and grants.
Thanks, Luell. Looks like Sarah has something to add about funding.
Thanks, Amber. So to expound a little bit more on Luell's points, there is government funding available But to look at more of the hard numbers, funding requires more cohesive and extensive planning if ABA is going to be combined with FAPE. So in the year 2013, the U.S. Department of Education had $1.15 trillion spent on the education system, but only 8% of that went to elementary and secondary school programs. Funding varies by state, and it also is impacted by the Department of Health and Human Services Head Start, the Department of Agriculture School Lunch Program, and taxpayers. So what about the other 92% of the funding? Another point to be considered is that President Trump's proposed updated school budget drops the government funding plan by 13%. 12.7 billion federal investments in IDEA grants benefits 6.8 million children with special needs currently. So according to the American Speech and Language Hearing Association, 46 out of 50 states have insurance mandated policies in place for the autism spectrum disorder. For example, in the state of Pennsylvania, Perform Care is the state legislative insurance company that has a policy supporting individuals with the diagnosis of autism, with funding available up to $37,000 per year with unlimited doctor visits related to the autism disorder. An important note is that Perform Care also allows for secondary insurance policies. So that way, if there are other extraneous costs or other medical concerns, the secondary care can help offset the family's costs. Other states, such as North Carolina, have plans available up to $50,000. So in conclusion, there are plans in place to sufficiently support the needs of the autism spectrum diagnosis for children outside of the school system that would avoid putting further strain on the shrinking budget.
Thank you, Sarah. You make some good points here. So we're now going to pass it on to the proposition side, where Leah, you can start speaking.
Thanks, Amber. Sarah made some great points. However, the truth is, parents cannot afford to pay for the amount of ABA services their children need on their own. You might think they're not on their own, they've got insurance. And it's true that most states, 46 and counting now in the United States, require insurance to cover autism diagnosis and treatment. However, there are caps on insurance coverage, and the amount of coverage available often dramatically decreases as children reach school age. Private ABA services cost on average $46,000 or more per year. This cost typically decreases as children reach school age, but only because the hours of service they receive decreases as they enter school and schedules become more conflicted. Less time is available for ABA. Federal funding for programs that train teachers to implement ABA appropriately in the classroom could be a cost-effective solution that takes some of the pressure off parents and gets students the therapy they need to reach their full potential. Requiring this under FAPE would only force this change to happen.
All right, thank you, Leah. So now I'm going to call upon Ricky, the parent. You can start speaking.
Hi, thank you, Amber. I listened to all the information. As a parent and hearing all the sides, I'm starting to realize how much the cost will be to raise an ABA implemented in my child's school. As it is right now, I live a low-income neighborhood and also low-income school as well. And it's very difficult to have an affordable system that, ABA therapy could come to my house, visit my home, private place, or any clinical services. Although I want ABA's service implemented in school for my child specifically, I cannot afford the raise of school as the cost will rise in public education.
Okay, thank you, Ricky. Now we're going to have questions at this time.
Hi, Ricky. My last question is, do you think not having the ABA in schools is adequately preparing any students for the future?
Hi, Sean. Yes, as a parent, I would like to have my child to get the best education possible. I know my child has challenges, struggles, but again, I imagine ABA services are implemented in school. I wonder if this becomes, if this will be effective if my child has more, have early learning academic achievements. Also, I wonder, I think ABA can help with his behavior. I think they can help with the behavior, but I don't know if they could help out with the academic education. So I wonder if that's going to be possible or not.
Okay, great question, Sean, and thank you for your response, Ricky. So at this time, it looks like we're all complete with what we have to say. I just want to thank the proposition and the opposition for sharing their sides. And does anyone have any more questions? No. Okay. So it looks like this debate is now concluded. Thank you and have a good night.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.